Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Mythic Cast. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by a special guest today, Josh, and is it Egan? I should have totally asked you before we started.
Egan, yep, it is Egan.
Boom! Crushed it. Got it right first try. What up? How are you doing today, Josh?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well, and one of the reasons I'm doing well is our sponsor over at puremtgo.com. You can check them out over at puremtgo.com. They've got all kinds of articles going on. They're sponsored over. They got their own sponsor, and we really appreciate them and what they do for the show, and it means a lot. So, but before we get too far into how awesome our sponsor is, let's talk about you for a second, Josh. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and about your time in Magic before we kind of jump into your grind in Mythic this month and the deck that you played.
Sure. I'm started out at the pre-release for Journey to Nyx, so not too long ago. And then about Khans of Tarkir time is when I decided I really, really like this game, so I want to keep on playing, take it a little bit more seriously. From there, it's just been the climb to try to figure it out.
So, what do you think that has captivated you in Magic thus far that really made you want to play it a bunch?
So when I was a kid, I was really into RTSs like StarCraft, Company of Heroes, and since then, that kind of is a game that has sparked that same interest, and the fact that no matter how much you know, how well you do, there's always something more you can improve.
I like that. That. Well, let's get into this month. I want to talk about your journey to Mythic. So we're recording here on the 1st of August, which means that you hit Mythic in July. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about what kind of decks that you were playing against? You played Jeskai Super Friends to hit Mythic. Why don't you talk to me about the kind of the decks that you were playing against in going through those ranks?
So a lot, beginning of the season, new set came out, a lot of the decks were weird, not well put together. Vampires is pretty clunky in the beginning, a lot of mono red, a lot of Esper, a little bit the Team Rare Elementals as well, mono blue, mono white, blue green flash. There's a huge variety.
So you played against the whole gambit in your grind to Mythic, you found?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there other decks that you tried other than Jeskai that you either had success with or just didn't think were as good?
I'm usually a mono red player, so I played mono red a lot at the beginning of the season and just found that it wasn't what I wanted. I also played a lot of Esper and a lot of Team Rare Elementals. I didn't really like how any of those were positioned at the time.
What is it about mono red right now that you didn't like?
It felt very fair compared to a lot of what the other decks in the format are doing. Turn 3 you're playing a Chain Whirler, and then your opponent's playing a Nissa on turn 3, and you're like, this just isn't I am not doing strong, powerful things.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Did you find that when you look at the overall power level of this format, when you look at a deck like Team Elementals that can actually have a storm kill and actually draw its entire deck in one turn and then just sit there and kill you with with omniscience, and did you find that, or you look at Scapeshift make 32 zombies?
Yep.
You look at Nexus taking all the turns. What do you think of the high power level of this standard format?
I am not a fan of it. I really like the standard formats where it's here's my plan and I'm going to play it out over the next 8 turns, very slow, grindy, lot of thought process. Not very much of let me slam these 2 cards. Do you have the counter to it? No, I win.
So why did you decide to pick up Jeskai?
I got really frustrated with the entire format. I was like, I don't like anything. I don't want to play anything. I'm not winning with anything. I'm going to go back to the deck I really liked last season, and I'm just going to grind it out because this sounds fun to me. Accidentally stumbled upon the fact that the format was kind of weak to sweepers at the time, and a lot of players didn't play around sweepers.
Sure. Did you find that something along the lines of oh my gosh, I can't even remember the name of the card. What is the name of the 3-mana sweeper? Deafening Clarion. There we go.
Yep.
Did you find that Deafening Clarion really gave you kind of an interesting edge against something like Scapeshift?
Yes, as long in the beginning when they didn't know how to play around field wipes, it was definitely oh, I'm gonna create all my zombies. And you're like, sweet, wipe them all. And they were sitting there with their 2 cards left in their hand. They're like, play my 1 land, get my 1 zombie, and you're like, okay, I'm able to like kind of leverage the game from here. Since then, people have, I think, gotten smarter around field wipes, so they're able to like, don't scape shift until I have to waste a field wipe, and then they scape shift, and I'm like, I don't have what I need to do.
Yeah. Did how long did it take you to grind a mythic once you picked up the Jeskai deck?
About 5 days.
About 5 days.
Yeah.
How many hours do you think you were putting in during that time?
It'd be anywhere from about 1 to 4 hours a day.
Okay,
There's
so about maybe 15 hours.
yeah, about around that much.
Okay. Is there any changes that you made along the way that you want to mention before we get into the deck?
Yes. So I know one thing. I sent out the deck list to my friends. Everyone's like, "Oh, you should play Chandra, the new 6-drop Chandra. She is so good." And so I started with her in the deck list, and I found out either she was too slow, like against Nexus of Fate, they're able to combo off before her. You could play her and start pinging your opponents. I started adding Search for Azcanta. It's a great card, but it's really good when you have to grind against Esper, because Esper is a very bad matchup.
Okay.
And Lyra is an addition to the sideboard once mono red start coming back.
Well, let's go over the deck really quick and kind of talk about where you ended up. So the list that we have has 17 Planeswalkers and 4 Narset, 3 Saheeli, 4 Teferi Time Reveler, 1 Karn Scion of Urza, 4 Sarkhan the Masterless, 1 Teferi Hero of Dominaria. The spells, they're 17 with 4 Opt, 4 Shock, 2 Spell Pierce, 1 Dovin's Veto, 2 Lightning Strike, 3 Deafening Clarion, 1 Cleansing Nova, and you have 1 Search for Azcanta along with 25 lands, with 4, the key ones being 4 Interplanar Beacon and 1 Temple of Epiphany. So, kind of my first question for you is what is this deck trying to do right now? Like, what is the main goal going on with this deck right now?
Main goal is play lots of Planeswalkers, trip up your opponent. Teferi is really good at stopping your opponents from playing spells on your turn, bouncing their threats. Narset's really good at stopping them from drawing extra cards to find things to beat you. And then you just kind of build this critical mass of Planeswalkers, and you play Sarkhan, and you either kill him in 1 turn or kill him over 2 turns.
One of the things that I quickly noticed looking at this list was the one of Planeswalkers. So you have 1 Karn and 1 Teferi. What is the reason that those are specifically one ofs? Karn has really fallen out of favor over the last format and a half. Why don't you talk about that one first?
Karn is there. Karn's +1 is basically find your land drop every turn. It's okay in the beginning, but he really shines when he gets to -2. Create a Karnstruct token, and then Saheeli's tokens makes his token bigger. So it's a plan B to kill your opponent, basically.
Okay, so it's kind of like when you have Saheeli, it acts as a way to make large tokens if you haven't drawn something or your cycles have been dealt with.
Yep.
Awesome. That's really cool. I one of the things that you think about when playing this deck is sometimes those Saheeli tokens are going to be enough, and if, your Sarkhans go away, you could have a really hard time winning the game, so that makes a lot of sense.
It's like hitting him for 3 damage is good every turn, but sometimes it just isn't enough.
Tell me about the Teferi. This is a card that, I got to play yesterday a little bit when playing this deck, and it was interesting to have Teferi in a deck that doesn't play a lot of instants, and that, is it just kind of a catch-all answer? Like, what's going on with this card?
He's there mostly to draw you extra cards, and then he's also a 5-mana removal spell where you tuck something you don't want to deal with into their deck. So it's a lot of keeping them off kilter for a little bit until you can able to set up your combo turns.
Okay.
And he's like your planned 2.5 win, where if you get to ult him, you just kind of be like, okay, I have the ult there, so hopefully this helps me get to the win.
That's fair. Have you won tucking Teferi with this deck?
I tried, and I ended up killing my Teferi pretty near the end, so that was a little disappointing. But
all right, yeah. I mean, it seems tough to win that way with this deck, but I guess it certainly could happen, and it's nice to have at least something else to be doing. Why don't we talk really quickly about Interplanar Beacon? What role does this card play in this deck?
This is the card that lets you play all of these Planeswalkers It also gives you the benefit of gaining some life. So you can take hits early on in the game, and one beacon gives you one life per planeswalker cast. When you get 2 or 3 beacons out, like that is chunks of life that is difficult for almost any deck to punch through. There is a interesting little thing I've noticed with Narset and Interplanar Beacon. She's the only double blue planeswalker in the deck. So if you have 5 lands, let's say 2 Steam Vents, 2 Sacred Foundries, and an Interplanar Beacon, and you have Narset and Dovin's Veto in your hand, Arena Auto Tapper will tap 2 Steam Vents and a Sacred Foundry and leave up Sacred Foundry and Interplanar Beacon in your hand or open. So sometimes you need to actually auto click how you want your mana spent on Narset.
Sure.
Yeah, specifically for Narset. This is the only card I found that has this issue.
All right, that's interesting to know. Let's talk about Sarkhan for just a minute. This is a card that the deck really functions around. Why is Sarkhan so important in the deck?
Sarkhan serves the purpose of being a token maker, so he makes dragons. The passive kind of helps stop other decks from attacking. So X1s can't swing into Sarkhan's dragon because they'll all get pinged by the dragon. If you have 2 dragons out, Scapeshift zombies cannot attack in because then you double ping every single zombie that attacks you. But he also serves as your main like combo kill, where you play him plus swinging with one to 3 walkers, and slowly start chunking them for damage. 4 damage is a lot after a few turns.
Do you find that you are like, how are you playing your Sarkhans to make sure that they live so that you can win the game?
It's usually I'm playing them when I've built up the game to the point where I'm either winning like this turn or next turn. He's more of your last planeswalker in the line of planeswalkers, or if you know like my opponent is exhausted on resources, I can play him while I have a Narset out and able to start swinging in. He's your way to kind of like, I found that when you get top deck wars, if you're able to play him last, create a token, even if they kill the token, he'll be there to kill off the opponent.
One of the things that I noticed playing this deck is it kind of has a interesting time with larger creatures. How do you combat those large creatures with shocks and lightning strikes and Clarion being your main removal?
Clarion plus shock or lightning strike can be the solution. Teferi bouncing is a lot of the time is the solution. It's not great to bounce a Hydra Crisis back, but if you're able to like leverage getting in damage to the life gain they're getting, it can be worth it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Is that also one of the reasons your sideboard is so heavy on larger removal spells?
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's why there's the one Deafening Clarion main board, because it's kind of a catch-all against.
Sorry, you mean the Cleansing Nova?
Yes, Cleansing Nova. The one of Cleansing Nova on the main board, kind of a catch-all against artifacts or enchantments or big creatures.
Totally fair. So one of the things that you mentioned was actually the format's weakness to sweepers. Why don't you talk about that for a second?
So it seemed like vampires, if they didn't get like multiple lords down or a way to pump up big creature, or get an Andante Vanguard out, you could sweep them and they'd have a really tough time rebuilding. Hero Precinct 1, if you were able to field wipe out their entire board, then they're stuck with some planeswalkers. Otherwise, like the Temur Elemental Simic, they just threw a bunch of little dorks on the field. If you're able to wipe them, sometimes their hand wouldn't function because it would keep 2 lands, 3 dorks, and a Nissa.
Yeah.
And so when you're able to just wipe their board or wipe all of their lands off the field, that was pretty backbreaking for them.
Is Spell Pierce a concession to this deck's power level on the play versus the draw?
Yes. It's also just an easy way to tag a Nissa early or a Teferi early.
Well, it's funny because when you were talking about Deafening Clarion, you think about how much more powerful that line is on the play once your opponent has played a 1-drop and a 2-drop or a 1-drop and a 3-drop, and you're able to take those both out. But as you think about on the draw, their Nissa is already in play by the time that would be deployed. So, that's why I thought Spell Pierce.
Spell Pierce is also good for it. It's just a 1-mana catch to a lot of different situations. Synergize as well as Saheeli. On turn 4, you can play Saheeli with Spell Pierce backup.
Is Saheeli's mana being hybrid really good for this deck? I mean, we talked a little bit about Narset and being double blue, but I actually haven't had any mana problems yet. I'm curious what the mana in this deck looks like.
So far, the only times I've ever have issues with the mana is like if you only draw 3 of your lands and you need the fourth and the fifth mana. Otherwise, Saheeli's super easy to cast. Interplanar Beacon just makes all the planeswalkers super easy to cast.
Okay. One thing that I would want to know from you is what is like the coolest interaction going on in this deck?
So Sarkin can plus and turn everyone into dragons. So when they're in their dragon mode, damage dealt to them doesn't remove loyalty counters. Also, that means, let's say you have a Narset on 2, she's a dragon, you can -2 her, and she will be able to activate her ability, but still be a creature until the end of turn. Which at the end of the turn, do the state-based action, she'll go into the graveyard.
That's
I
pretty
think
cool.
that's one of the coolest interactions of the deck.
Yeah, I think that when I was looking at the deck and playing the deck, one of the other things that I really, had underestimated was just the ability of Narsets to grab other planeswalkers. When you think of Narset, you think of her grabbing, removal spells and things like that. But like in this deck, she's grabbing just the most powerful cards in your deck every time, which is pretty sweet.
She's basically grabbing your creatures of the deck, so you can keep on playing your game plan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Cool. Well, let's go over the sideboard really quick. We have 2 Aether Gust, 1 Dovin's Veto, 2 Fry, 2 Lava Coil, 1 more Deafening Clarion, 3 Legion Warboss, 2 Prison Realm, 1 more Cleansing Nova, and 1 Lyra Dongbringer. You said Lyra was a recent addition to the deck. Why don't you talk about that?
Lyra is there just because sometimes Interplanar Beacon just isn't enough against the aggro decks. Plus, you need something that can close like a plan C to close the game out. Um, excuse me. She is just a way to fend off blockers or fend off attackers as well.
Okay. One of the questions that I would have for you is actually around Legion Warboss. When you when I looked at this card, I instantly thought with all the instants and sorceries in the deck that I might actually be interested in Chandra. Is that something that you thought about? The 3 mana Chandra.
That is something I've thought about. Legion Warboss is just able to apply more damage
That's true.
than Lil Chandra is, and he's mostly our way against like Esper and combo deck Scape Shift to just get creatures on the board and swing as fast as possible and hard as possible. Um, Also, I don't want something that gets Elder Spelled because Elder Spell is very good against this deck.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. See, because in my head it was like Chandra fits into your game plan that you already have, but it actually makes a lot of sense if you're trying to specifically do it against Elder Spell and Esper.
Try to diversify your threats against that deck a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense. So one of the things, if you look at this deck, is there's very, very few cards from M20 in it. You have the Temple, but then your sideboard has 2 Fry and 2 Aether Gust. Why don't you talk about those?
Aether Gust is kind of your additional sideboard card against big green creatures. Put it on top of their deck so you don't have to deal with it, or maybe they'll put it on the bottom. It's a way to buy a turn against Scape Shift. A lot of the time, you just need a turn, maybe 2 turns to get past them. Fry is just a great removal spell against control decks and mono blue because it's uncounterable.
Is Mono Blue a tough matchup?
Shocks and Teferi make it really easy, but if they're able to dismantle your game plan at all, counter a shock, counter a Teferi, it can be difficult, but most of the time I find it pretty easy.
Okay. So tell me about the diversification of the removal in the sideboard, or just the diversification of answers. Your deck on its surface, it has a ton of answers and it's kind of this Super Friends control deck. When are you bringing in these different variety of answers, and how do you know what to board out?
So a lot of the time, one of the biggest removal spells that gets boarded out is shock, because if you can't deal with anything that like a 4 butt, shock is awful against that. So you bring in lava coils. Prison realms are really good against opposing planeswalkers or Undaunted Vanguard because red removal is really bad against him. Otherwise, it's kind of easy way to just kind of have all of the answers to the format in just a few cards.
Sure.
It's
Is
that.
is the cleansing nova? Was there any thought to something along the lines of, um, the instant speed sweeper that gives them basics?
Sell the wreckage.
Yeah.
I haven't really considered it mostly because I'm worried about Teferi in the Bant Scapeshift matchup.
Oh, that's totally fair. Okay.
Um, Otherwise, I have considered it. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at how many basics like Jund Dinos or Vampires is running. But sometimes giving them a lot of mana can be really dangerous as well.
That's fair. So, is there anything that people should really know? I mean, you talk about Shock being a card that you board out a lot. What are the times that you're boarding out different Planeswalkers?
In the aggro matchups, I will board out Teferi and Karn. And mono red matchup will be like a Teferi as well. I don't really find Teferi to be amazing in that matchup. Um, a lot of the slower pieces. Otherwise, most of the time they don't come out.
Okay, so there's not a time where you're really looking at Narset and thinking this isn't great in this matchup.
She's kind of the way that just help you propel forward. There are times where it depends on how like the red deck is set up. Like the newer red deck with the 2 mana enchantment, like you play Narset, tick it down, and then they swing like 5 damage at Narset. So she'll die right away. That's a matchup I have not played a lot, but I've been tinkering around with taking out some of the 3-drop planeswalkers and just playing a vast amount of removal.
Okay. Is there anything specific that you're doing against maybe some of the mid-range decks? Do you find that matchup to be good? Don't have to do as much?
Cleansing Nova does a lot of work in those matchups. Um, Definitely Clarion's so good against all the dorks. And depending on the mid-range matchup, Legion Warboss is really good. Like the Esper Tempo decks, Legion Warboss will still play. But something against like Risen Reef, I find that like the 1 mana 1/1 tokens just isn't enough, and then they drop a Cavalier Thorn, and there's nothing you can do with those tokens anymore.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. What what do you think about the Esper matchup? You said it was bad. Are you talking Esper Heroes bad, or are you talking Esper Control is bad, or are they both equally bad?
They're both equally bad. Generally, the control's worse because they like to have more Elder Spells main board.
So what causes that matchup to be rough for you? If we can kind of talk about that.
Yeah. Basically, they have like Othakaya is a basically 3 mana kill target planeswalker against your deck. Elder Spell is a way to just it's a 2 mana wrath. So you just kill all of your planeswalkers for 2 mana, make their Teferi big, alt it. They generally can just go more over the top than you can.
So what is the reason to play this over something like Esper?
It's fun. It's also it also comes kind of left field where people are prepared, like, oh, I have this Planeswalker matchup in Esper, so I have to worry about these colors. And then you play red, and they're like, oh, I wasn't expecting Shock. I wasn't expecting Deafening Clarion. Sarkin, I wasn't expecting just a bunch of dragons to swing at me.
That makes a lot of sense.
It also closes the game faster than Esper does.
That's definitely true. So let's kind of talk really quickly. We talked about Mono Red. We talked about Esper. You talk to me about Odonto Vanguard. I mean, this card is one of the cards that I think the format just isn't prepared for right now, and it's one of the reasons that Vampires has been doing so well. What I mean, you specifically have a plan for it in Prison Realm. What does your matchup against Vampires look like outside of that?
I have found it fairly easy as long as, Vampires doesn't just kind of hit the nuts and go off right away. You're able to just push them back, kill all their little guys. Shock is really good against them. Knight of the Ebon Legion, that's the new rare from Core 20. That one can be a little difficult when it can pump itself into a 4/5. But most of the time, like Cleansing Nova is really good against them too, which is not something I usually bring in against aggro matchups. But they have a lot of 4 butts.
Sure.
Otherwise, I have not found that matchup to be too much of an issue.
Okay. What do you think your matchup is like versus the best deck on the format right now, Scapeshift?
I think it depends on the player. If the player knows how to play around field wipes, it can be difficult. But they have a tough time blocking flyers and also not gaining a ton of life. So you're able to apply a lot. If you're able to apply pressure early and just kind of swing in with 3 dragons to kill them right away, that's really good. Saheeli makes tokens to block, which the first scape shift, she can usually block all of them. Second scape shift, you need a field wipe.
How do you find the counter spells play in that matchup when you think about something like the 4 mana spells in Scapeshift And the other, oh my gosh, dude, I'm forgetting cards names left and right today. This is
Uh,
impressive.
Circuitous route.
Yeah, Securitas route. Do you find that Spell Pierce stays in that matchup for those reasons, or
No, I at first I like just to test out Spell Pierce in that matchup. I was keeping it, but I found like just countering root was not enough. You had to counter root or growth spiral, and past that point, there was nothing that Spell Pierce is going to counter. So
that
that's
makes a
why
lot of
like
sense?
that's why Dovin Veto's in the main board is the concession to that matchup.
So, is this a deck that you would recommend going forward to people?
Yes, I think this deck is fun to play, offers a different game plan than any other decks. There's definitely some strong points and some weak points in the meta for the deck.
What are the decks that you are looking to play against going forward?
I really like to play against aggro. I'm an aggro player, so I kind of know how their game plan is going to work and how I can dismantle it. Otherwise, mid range I think offers a lot of fun and interesting choices, but most of the time, like Cleansing Nova and Deafening Clarion just kind of wraps those games up for you.
Is there something outside of Esper that you kind of wish people could avoid if they were picking this up?
Scape Shift.
Okay,
That's one deck that I wish people would put down, but it's still a winnable matchup.
all right. Uh, well, I guess that is gonna do it for this week. Unless you have anything you'd like to add on the deck or on your grind at Mythic.
Nothing else.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Josh, for coming on. It was exciting to get to talk to you about kind of a deck that I think a lot of people love. Like, if you think about this deck, this is a deck that just boomed in popularity after it won that SEG. People picked it up immediately and really gravitated towards it. So it's cool to see somebody grinding through Mythic with it again.
It's a lot of fun, and I would 100% recommend anyone picking it up.
Awesome. Well, where can people find you if they want to talk to you about this deck, Josh?
I'm on Twitter at Foil Basic MT.
I was typing in your thing for the show and I never realized it. Like looking at your Twitter handle on Twitter, I was just always like, I just read it as Josh because I didn't put together what your Twitter handle was, and I was like, oh, Foil Basic Mountain. So when you said you were an aggro player, it like clicked in my head. I was like, oh, he's a mono red player. Okay.
Yep. I'm at heart a mono red player.
Well, Foil Basic Mountains are a lot cheaper than some dual lands, so
100%.
Well, you can find me at Spencer13H. You can find the show at Arena Mythic Cast. You can find the show every week on the Constructive Criticism Network on Spotify, on iTunes, on Google. So thank you, everybody, so much for listening this week. And we'll talk to everybody next week with another episode of Mythic Cast.